Greetings and salutations. Welcome to another episode of Autist Circle, episode 11, I think. And I am your host, the Bleach Demon, greeted as always. Hi, greetings. Joined as always by my co-host, Total Blackout Painting. Apparently this is going to be YouTube is special and more autistic than the artists we're talking about.
Yeah, it looks like YouTube's being retarded on this one. So if it doesn't pick up at some point, I'll just re-upload the VOD later because I'm recording it on OBS, and I'm sure OBS is fine. But yeah, it looks like YouTube is fucking struggling. YouTube's on the struggle bus. I don't know what the hell's going on. Unless it's my network. But anyhow, regardless.
I'm getting it on my end too, so yeah. No,
Yeah,
Gustave Moreau, huh?
YouTube's just being ass today. So yeah, today we're talking about Gustave Moreau, the French symbolist painter. He is one of the progenitors of the French symbolist movement, and one of the kind of forefathers of modern art and many modern art movements as we know them today. So first thing we'll do is, let me jump over to my scene here. So first thing we'll do is I have some notes on what symbolism means. So symbolism is an artistic and literary movement that rejected the idea that art should describe the world as we see it. Instead of focusing on realistic scenes of modern city life, the symbolist artists wanted to suggest invisible realities, dreams, myths, spiritual states, erotic danger, death, memory, mystery, and psychological tension. Symbolism comes partly as as a reaction against realism, which this is a realist painting from Gustave Courbet, another French realist painter. Which, if you look him up, you're just going to find he liked to paint nude ladies. Which is a standard for a French pervert.
Wait, French pervert, you repeated yourself, dude.
Right. So LGM says the volume is working fine, just the visual is a bit shaky. Okay.
Cool.
So,
thank you, sir.
This is the meeting, or Bonjour Monsieur Courbet, from 1854. And then also from Naturalism, which this is a naturalist painting from Jules Bastien Lepage, October, Gathering Potatoes, and the more materialist side of 19th century modernity. Instead of everyday modern life, symbolism turns towards myth, and instead of visible facts, they pursue dreams and scripture. Instead of social observation and naturalistic detail, it looks at the hidden meaning and inner experience, suggestion and mystery. And this makes symbolism important because it helps shift Western art away from strict representation and towards the interior world. It becomes a major stepping stone for movements like Expressionism, which this is The Scream, we all know, by Edvard Munch, or Surrealism, which we talked about this painting. This is a Christ of St. John on the Cross by Salvador Dali. Or fantasy art, and this is The Swamp Demon by Frank Frazetta. And other prominent symbolist. Go ahead.
Which I don't think we covered this particular piece when we covered Frazetta.
We didn't. But I found this one and I wanted to throw some more Frazetta art in. So this is a
nice.
But as you'll see, as it comes, as the work come along, you'll see some of the symbolist influence in this painting. So other prominent symbolist artists include Gustav Klimt, who we will talk about in a later episode in his fancy muumuu, Odilon Redon, and Pierre Purvis de Chavannes, this guy here. So with that said, um, let's move on to the timeline.
Oh, hell yeah. Eh,
So this is our familiar art history timeline.
honestly, I think this is
And as we
one of
can
the best
see,
things we've done as far as like just a constant theme is this timeline. It just helps me visualize where the artists and their styles kind of come into prominence and fade. It's great.
yeah, I appreciate it. I think it's a good running. I think it's a good running theme, and it gives us a good quick visualization of where the artist is and where some of the major events that happened during their lifetime. So, as you can see, the revolution of 1948 happened during his lifetime, and then, of course, the Franco-Prussian War, which will factor in later, the Paris Commune, and of course, the Symbolist Manifesto, which really kicked off the actual symbolist movement, or cemented it. But
Hmm.
that didn't happen until much later in his life. So that's why I say he was kind of a progenitor to the symbolist movement. He didn't His life doesn't overlap it,
Hmm.
and his works don't overlap it entirely either. Some of them, or a few of them, happen outside of the symbolist movement, so they're really beforehand. So let me read my little blurb here. Um, while Romanticism gives him myth, passion, and spectacle, symbolism gives a dream, ambiguity, and hidden meaning. Moreau's career overlaps with the rise of realism, naturalism, and impressionism. And while Courbet and the realists push towards ordinary life, labor, politics, and material fact, Moreau moved towards myth, scripture, and dream. And while naturalism emphasized the observable world, Moreau emphasized the invisible one. And while Impressionism explored light, atmosphere, and modern perception, Moreau explored ancient symbols, ritualized beauty, and spiritual anxiety, and the private imagination. Moreau's art looks backward to myth because the modern world made myth necessary again. And I think we talked about that a bit during the Romanticism and Delacroix, and how the modern world, and of course during the 19th century, was the beginning of industrialization and the rise of the middle class, and the stratification of the social structure beyond just kings and serfs.
Hmm.
So, symbolism as a literary movement is associated with the later 19th century, especially the 1880s, but Moreau was already painting major symbolist works in the 1860s. And Moreau belongs to the first wave of visual symbolism, the older generation who prepares the ground before symbolism becomes more widespread. Moreau's branch is the most jeweled, theatrical, religious, and myth saturated. He gives symbolism a language of altars, idols, monsters, and prophetic severed heads, doomed women, heroic martyrs, and gods too terrible to behold. He's not painting fantasy as escapism, he is using fantasy as revelation. And he influences the next generation as a teacher. He taught at the École des Beaux-Arts, where his students include Henri Matisse, Georges Ronald, and Albert Marquette. So, or Marquois. And with that being said, after the timeline, let's move into the biography here. So, Gustave Moreau was born on April 6, 1826, in Paris. His father, Louis Jean Marie Moreau, was an architect, and his mother, de Pauline de Montier, was often described as a musician. So his family was a cultured upper middle class family in Paris, and he remained close to his mother throughout her entire life until her death in 1844. He was a little bit of a mama's boy. He was a frail and sensitive child that lived a somewhat solitary life, and he showed an aptitude for drawing at an early age. talents that were encouraged by his mother and father. His mother provided an influence of sensitivity and refinement, while his father provided an influence of structure and ornamentation. In 1837, at the age of 11, he began his formal education at the Collège Rouen. I'm not sure how to say that, but whatever. And he was a boarder there, and he stayed there until for 3 years until 1840, when his sister Camille took ill and died. She was 13 and he was 14 at the time. And this caused his parents to bring him home because of his own bad health.
Mm.
After Camille's death, his world narrowed, but his imagination expanded. So we've got a lot of tragedy, and a lot of our artists have tragedy in their lives.
Yeah. Huh.
Um, his career did not begin as a desperate struggle for survival. He had the support, education, and household stability to pursue a demanding artistic path. Later in life, his parents even bought the house at 14 Rue de la Rochefoucauld in Paris, where Moreau would live and work for the rest of his life, and which would eventually become the Musée de Gustave Moreau.
Hmm.
Yeah, F's in the chat for the stream.
Oh,
It's blinking in and out, so it's on the struggle bus, but it should be back now. It's just cutting in and out.
yay, YouTube.
I'm not going to spend a lot of time. Yeah, I'm not going to spend a lot of time worrying about the stream. I'm just going to get through it and
Yeah.
upload it later. So this is a scene from the museum, Musée Gustave Moreau, which is his former house. This is a current photo.
Hmm.
And it just shows, how many of his works are there still.
Ah, yes, the graffiti on the front and the EU banner stuck in the corner.
Yeah, that other one is wonderful. So this is Theodore Chaucerot, who was a friend, a big part of his life. Moreau trained early to become a history painter. At the time, it was considered to be one of the highest and most prestigious forms of painting, which was reflected in other artists like Delacroix. From 1844 to 1846, he studied with Francois-Edouard Picot. And this is one of Picot's paintings. This is The Death of Jacob from 1813. Picot's training emphasized drawing, anatomy, and composition, and historical seriousness, and also preparation for the salon system, which was big during that time.
Mm-hmm.
In 1846, he was admitted to the École Royale des Beaux-Arts, which is this building here, where he prepared to enter the academic art world of the 19th century. After two failed attempts at the Prix de Rome, Moreau left the École in 1849. After leaving, he continued to learn intensely, and one of his most important avenues for his continuing learning was to copy the old masters at the Louvre. That helped him expand his understanding of color, composition, and technique. But two living French artists mattered deeply to Moreau's development, and that was, of course, Eugene Delacroix, and this is one of his paintings. This is The Death of Ophelia in 1838.
Mm-hmm.
And, of course, Chaucerot, who I already spoke about. And this is a painting from Chaucerot. This is Macbeth and the Three Witches, painted in 1855. Chaucerot was more important of the two as they developed a close friendship. And Chaucerot had already carved out a fascinating place between Ingres like classicism and Delacroix like romanticism. So he was kind of a bridge between romanticism and classicism in a way.
Interesting.
So in 1852, Moreau was admitted to the official salon for the first time with a large paeta. which this is Michelangelo's sculpture
Hmm.
that we talked about last episode.
Mhm.
Moreau's painting is actually now lost.
Hmm.
So I included this one here just to demonstrate what it is. He was drawn from the beginning to sacred suffering, tragic beauty, and elevated subjects. In the early 1850s, like I said previously, he developed a close friendship slash mentorship with Chaucerot, who was really only a few years older than Moreau. He'd already carved out a place between Ingres and classicism, like I said. Moreau admired him greatly, and he knew him and was deeply affected by his early death in 1856 at the age of 37. Moreau wanted to study in Italy through the the Prix de Rome, like we've talked about a bunch of times. But since he failed to win it, and after his friend's death, he just went on his own terms to Italy on October 18th in 1857. His trip to Italy was a serious artistic mission. He didn't go to imitate the Renaissance. He went to reclaim the depth of historical painting that he felt had been lost in recent years. And when he returned in 1859, he'd made hundreds of copies of works from the old masters. And his next major work appeared after the trip happened in 1864, and that is this painting here. This is Oedipus and the Sphinx. Was painted in 1864, and this oil on canvas, it measures 81 by 1/4 inches, or 81 and 1/4 inches by 41 and 1/4 inches, or 206.4 by 104.8 centimeters. And it currently resides in the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York. It was first exhibited at the Paris Salon, where it was greeted as a major event. The Musée de Gustave Moreau quotes one contemporary reaction that described its appearance at the salon as a clap of thunder inside the Palais de l'Industrie. I don't know how to say that word.
Palais de l'Industrie. I fucked that up too.
There you go.
All I know is that the first part would have been le coup de foudre, clap of lightning, clap of thunder. Yeah.
Mm. So this painting comes from the story of Oedipus, which the story of Oedipus is on the road to Thebes, or this specific part of Oedipus's journey. On the road to Thebes, Oedipus encounters a sphinx, a monstrous creature who was terrorizing travelers by asking them a riddle, and anyone who answered the riddle incorrectly is killed. And the riddle was, of course, we all know what the riddle is: what walks on 4 legs in the morning, 2 legs at noon, and 3 legs in the evening. And he answers correctly: man, crawling as an infant, walking upright in adulthood, and using a cane in old age. By solving the riddle, he defeats the Sphinx and frees Thebes. And the Met notes that Moreau includes the remains of earlier victims in the foreground, reminding us that this is not an abstract intellectual contest. Oedipus is standing there while many others have died. And the painting is a crucial turning point because he had spent years studying, training in Italy, copying old masters, and searching for a way to renew history painting. And with this work, he had finally found what he was looking for. The painting is tall and narrow, which intensifies the confrontation. Oedipus stands like a pillar, and the Sphinx is attached to him almost like a second being fused to his body. And their intense gaze is really the center of the painting. The image shows, of course, the confrontation between good and evil, and spiritual and physical forces, and the two sexes as well. The Sphinx becomes more than a mythological beast. She is a figure of seduction, and fatal mystery. And Oedipus is not merely a clever prince, but he's a figure of intellectual and spiritual self-command. The ultimate meaning is, can reason remain upright in the face of mystery, desire, and death? And the painting, it greatly advanced his reputation and embodied his ambition to create academic art that was not academic. So we'll just zoom in and look on the details here. And Um, Again, that gaze, like I said, really does become the center point of the painting.
Mm-hmm.
The way they're looking at each other is really what draws you in the most. And there's a lot of details. And down at the bottom, this is what the Met was saying. You can see there's a crown and bones and bodies and other people down at the bottom representing the people who had tried and failed the Sphinx's mystery or the Sphinx's riddle.
Mm-hmm. You know, here's something.
There's a bunch of other.
I was just noticing,
Go
the
ahead.
snake on the column is kind of an interesting little detail.
Hmm. Yeah, and that kind of represents the lurking danger.
Mm-hmm.
What the snake is meant to do, because it's hidden behind the column, hidden from him in the column, which of course the danger is front and present, but of course there's always little hints of lurking danger throughout the painting, um, which is something that really is a symbolist thing. Of course, there's a there's a bush with I think these are meant to be figs on here as well.
I would imagine, yes.
And another striking thing about the image is the narrow ledge that is because you can look in the back and see the narrow ledge that has led him to where he is now, and of course the narrow ledge that he's standing on now, which shows quite a bit of danger as well.
Mm-hmm.
And you can kind of, I mean, you can understand why this would be such a kind of interesting piece to come about at that time as well.
Hmm. Very cool. All right.
So as he was trying to capture mythology, we'll go ahead and jump over to the next painting we got here, which is this is Orpheus from 1865. It's oil on wood, and it measures 154 by 99.5 centimeters, or 60.6 by 39.2 inches. And this is currently at the Musée d'Orsay in Paris. Orpheus does not show the myth's famous heroes singing, charming animals descending into the underworld, or losing Eurydice. Instead, Moreau picks the moment after the violence is over. Orpheus has been torn apart by the Maenads, and a young Thracian woman has found his severed head and lyre, and she cradles them with extraordinary tenderness as though holding a holy relic.
Hmm.
So the Greek myth of Orpheus is the supreme poet and musician. And his songs are so beautiful that they charm wild beasts, trees, stone, and even the powers of the underworld. And after the death of his beloved Eurydice, he becomes estranged from ordinary life. And in one later tradition, the Maenads, the frenzied followers of Dionysus, tear him apart, and his head and lyre continue to sing as they drift away. So, of course, the central figure is a young woman dressed in richly colored and vaguely Eastern garments. She lowers her gaze towards Orpheus's head with a mournful calm. And it's not meant to be grotesque. The severed head rests delicately on the lyre, and her posture turns the whole image into something somewhat devotional. The brutality of the myth is transformed into something solemn. She does not recoil from the head. She cradles it gently, lowering her eyes with a calm, as a as a mourner before a relic. Moreau turns the severed head of the poet into an icon of art surviving death,
Hmm.
which is what this whole story is meant to represent: art surviving death. They couldn't silence his singing even in death. So the brutality, oh nope, I already read that. And then this is where the symbolist instincts become clear. The painting is not just illustrating a mythological event, it is using myth to suggest an inward truth, that beauty may be destroyed physically, but not spiritually, and that the artist may die, but the song remains. So if Oedipus and the Sphinx is a painting about surviving the riddle of death, Orpheus is a painting about what death cannot silence. We'll
And
I didn't want to belabor the details on this one too much, but
I'm
go
just
ahead.
fascinated by the two turtles down at the bottom. Just
hmm
just like, hey, there's two
There's a
turtles.
ton of
What's going on?
there's a ton of little details that get that he packs into a lot of his paintings. Like you can look in the background and see there's people playing music up on the arch behind them. Of course, the flowers, the turtles, the river. And when he was torn apart, he was cast into a river, and that's why I say his head drifts. His head drifts away. They threw his head in a river, and it kind of floated away down with the current.
Hmm.
So again, very much like Oedipus and the Sphinx, he tries to capture that the capture the feeling of the myth of the mythology and portray it with his own touch in a way that makes it feel more modern, but still ancient at the same time.
Hmm.
So, with that, we'll jump over to our third painting in this series, which is Prometheus. And this was painted in 1868. It's oil on canvas, and it measures 2.05 by 1.22 meters, or 80 by 80.7 by 48 inches, and it's currently located at the Musée Gustave Moreau in Paris. So after Oedipus and the Sphinx and Orpheus, Moreau turns to another great figure in Greek myth, who's Prometheus, the titan who stole fire from the gods to give it to mankind. Prometheus is a sufferer on behalf of mankind. He defied divine authority, but not out of selfish ambition. He suffered because he has chosen to elevate humanity. And the fire is not the fire here, it's not just flame, of course. And this painting appeared at the Salon in 1868. Critics broadly rejected it,
Hmm.
but Théophile Gautier, one of the art critics, singled it out. He observed that Moreau had not made Prometheus into a colossal titan of Aeschylus, but rather
Aeschylus?
as a more human figure. Aeschylus, yeah. Um, but rather into a more human figure who seemed deliberately to resemble Christ. And Gautier connected Prometheus to the Christian idea of a figure who suffers for humanity's redemption, which is very much what Prometheus did. The flame above his head transforms him visually into something more than a captive titan. It marks him as a bearer of illumination. The fire for which he is punished becomes inseparable from his identity. And in this one, the landscape is stark, kind of like in the Sphinx.
Hmm.
It's vertical and it seems very oppressive, very lonely. And Prometheus is pressed into a dark rocky wall with a distant chasm opening behind him. The setting isolates him from ordinary human life, and he suffers above the world in a realm of mythic punishment. So the wound on his side that the eagle, which looks like a vulture in this painting, but it's an eagle in the myth, is the quest marker over his head. Yeah, um, it's reminiscent of the wound in the side of Christ from the spear. Of course, he does have a very Christ-like appearance here. Prometheus does, which mirrors a lot, of course, with the. It's very analogous to Christ and how Christ is meant to suffer for, or Christ was made to suffer for humanity on behalf of humanity, because he was trying to elevate humanity and bring us out of the darkness. Um, and I think that that's a very apt connection for this painting. Like it's not just that the myth of Prometheus is very on its own is analogous to Christ elevating people, but this painting itself, I think, reinforces that even more by showing the suffering of the lone individual over and over again. for the sin of helping humanity, basically,
Hmm.
taking the sins of humanity upon himself and suffering greatly as a result.
It's kind of a interesting parallel.
Mhm. So, and we'll jump forward to the 1870s now. This is the abduction of Europa from, and it's not, we're not covering this one. This is just part of the presentation. So Prometheus, and I have Grape of Europa, which is another painting here, which is it's this painting here. Another excerpt from Greek myth. It shows they were at shows of the Salon, or they were shown at the Salon of 1869, where he won a medal, and the critical response was less than he desired, and he did not exhibit again until 1876. And he was not idle between 69 and 76. He became more private, and he did not retreat from painting. He retreated from public life. During these years, he continued working in his studio, refining his increasingly elaborate and inward looking visual language. By the time he returned to the salon, his art had become more ornate, more mysterious, and more fully symbolist. In the early 1870s were also the years of crisis. They were also years of crisis in France.
Hmm.
The Franco-Prussian War began in 1870, and ended in French defeat with the collapse of Napoleon III's Second Empire and the political upheavals that followed from there. Moreau himself actually enlisted in the National Guard at the beginning of the war, but he was discharged because of rheumatic fever.
Hmm.
So in 1876, he returned to the Salon with our next painting, which is this is Salome dancing before Herod. This was painted between 1874 and 1876. It's oil on canvas, and it measures 56 and a half by 41 and 1/16 inches, or 143 and a half by 104.3 centimeters. And this is currently at the Hammer Museum in Los Angeles.
Hmm.
And like I said previously, this was exhibited at the Salon of 1876, where it caused quite a sensation.
Yeah, I can see
And the
why.
Hammer Museum, right? So the Hammer Museum describes it as one of the most remarkable and best known paintings in its collection, and notes that it is arguably Moreau's most important work. Of course, we can see the dramatic shift in styles between the Greek paintings and this.
Very much
Um,
so.
this is more the Greek paintings, or the mythology paintings, are more um, controlled and tightly refined, while this one is a lot more ornate. It has a lot more detail in it, and it has a more dreamlike quality to it. So this the scene of Salome dancing before Herod, John the Baptist had condemned the marriage between Herod Antipas and Herodias, who had previously been married to Herod's brother. Uh, Herodias wanted him silenced, and during a feast, her daughter Salome dances before Herod, pleasing him so much that he promises to grant her a reward. At her mother's urging, Salome asks for the head of John the Baptist. So the painting does not show the aftermath, it shows the moment of the dance before the demand is made or before the murder is fully brought into view. And of course, one of the more striking things about the painting is the setting. It does not look like an ordinary dining chamber. It looks like a vast sacred interior with dreamlike architecture. Salome is the visual and symbolic focus of the work, but she is not portrayed as a naturalistic young woman caught in ordinary motion. She is rigid, delicate, and ceremonial. and her extended arm feels less like a dance choreography than an incantation.
Hmm.
Um, and he did not improvise this vision, he built it obsessively. He put so much detail into it, and we'll zoom in a little bit. I couldn't get a super high res image of this, but again, this is the symbolism that Moreau is known for, more fully realized than the Greek paintings. And of course, you can look at Salome and see her dress is covered in gems, um, and the other women in the background, and the guards in the background as well. They're all covered in gems and finery. King Herod himself sits on a very ornate, bejeweled throne, and and the archwork and all that stuff in the background is very much highly ornate as well. It is more, well, like I said, this is more of the symbolist painting that Moreau is currently known for, with the incredible amount of fine detail in each piece, while maintaining a kind of hazy, dreamy quality. Uh, the painting doesn't necessarily give you a feeling of a real place, but more of a dreamscape realized.
It is very much something where if you're reading a very descriptive book, where your mind's eye kind of gets some of the details, but then it either over elaborates some things or it omits details that you wouldn't necessarily include in your mind's eye. And that is really Moreau's style of art in this moment for me. It's, it's got the detail, and there's enough detail where you're going to get what he wants you to see, but then your brain just starts filling in all these other things, and that's fascinating.
Yeah, yeah, and you're right, LGM. Um, there are multiple versions of this painting, but this is the main one. This is the first one, and so this is the one I picked. And this is the one that was shown at the salon. So in following with this series, we're going to jump over to the next painting, which is the apparition, which is also part of this scene. Oh, it just totally dropped my stream entirely.
Oh, wow.
Dang, awesome.
Thanks, YouTube.
Yeah, thanks, YouTube. Well,
Wow.
whatever. We're gonna keep going. Like I said, I'm recording it. I'll upload it later.
So, yep. Okay. Well,
So we'll keep going. Um, this is the apparition, also painted in 1876. It's watercolor and it measures 106 by 72.2 centimeters, or 41.7 by 28.4 inches, and it's currently located in the Musée d'Orsay in Paris, but is held in the Department of Graphic Arts at the Louvre currently.
hmm.
And the setting again is, of course, uh, the Herod's palace, the palace temple. Salome appears in the foreground, nearly nude and adorned. She's in the aftermath or culmination of her dance. She extends her arm outward, but now the scene is ruptured. Before her floats the severed head of John the Baptist, glowing with a blinding halo and dripping blood from its neck. Herod sits to the left, hierarchic and immobile on his throne, besides Herodias. To the right stands the executioner, sword in hand, and the background dissolves into a strange architecture, mingling pagan divinities and medieval motifs and impossible ornamentation.
Hmm.
The decor of the apparition is less historically grounded than Salome, and the Musée Gustave Moreau says that the ornamental setting draws from distant centuries and civilizations, making the scene difficult to place in time or space and adding to its enigmatic character. So, with the Salome paintings, Moreau is no longer simply he no longer simply paints sacred stories. He paints the moment when sacred stories begin to dream back and really take on the that mythic proportion in the stories.
Hmm. Hmm.
So we'll zoom in and look at a few details here. So, of course, in this one, there's the incredible amount of ornamentation. And to think this is a watercolor is simply amazing. To get this kind of detail in a watercolor is fascinating.
That's amazing.
The the jewels on Salome are far more there's a far more jewels on this one than there is in the other one. And she portrayed in a much more kind of lascivious light in this one as she's partially nude. Uh, the uh, the head of John the Baptist, of course, looks on um, in a you know in a way that you would expect someone who's just been beheaded looks on. Um, but and I am not familiar with the story myself. The story of Salome and John the Baptist.
Uh, there's
Um,
really you
so
you
if
hit the
you if you
highlights. You hit the highlights.
yeah,
Yeah, I think the only other kind of thing to put in the context of this was because John the Baptist is the one who baptized Christ and was a prophet, that he was viewed as dangerous, and removing him was considered, shall we say, politically advantageous for Herod in a few ways. So that in a way it wasn't that big of an ask for Salome to ask for the head of John the Baptist, but it also kind of shows kind of a reflection of Eve in a sense to contrast against Mary.
that makes sense. Um, and it's a the way he portrays it here is very visceral. Aside from aside from the ornamentation, there's of course the blood dripping from the head and the blood on the floor, which which would reflect the violence of the scene, um, and the violence of the overall act in general.
Hmm.
Excuse me. So, uh, a couple of really interesting works, and that's why I included them here. Both of them exhibited at the Salon in 1876. So we'll move on to the next paintings here. So in the 1880s, after the success of Salome and the Apparition, his career becomes quieter and more withdrawn from the salon world. But inwardly, it is a period of immense production, private grief, growing official recognition, and increasingly ambitious symbolic projects. His final participation in the salon happened in 1880 with Helene and Galatée. This is picture here is Galatée. Um, and this next painting, which the Helene is more akin to or I mean the Galatea is more akin to previous mythological works.
Hmm.
There's of course quite a bit of ornamentation in it, but the dreamlike quality is not quite the same. It does have a more hard look to it,
Hmm.
while Helene, of course, has a lot more of the symbolist leaning to it with the ornamentation, the jewels, and the kind of rough and abstract, almost abstract looking people in the background. Of course, with things like the people at the bottom of the painting and the lyre as well.
Mm-hmm. Wait, does
So
Helene
after those,
Helene has prehensile toes?
yeah, she's got finger toes.
Sorry, that's a derail you there, but it's just like I can't get over that. I can't unsee that.
She's got monkey toes. Um, so so he left the salon world not after failure, but after triumph. Because these two paintings were the last ones he displayed, and they were both received very favorably by the establishment. So one of his major occupations in the 1880s was the lavish series of 64 watercolors illustrating La Fontaine's Fables, which is this big-nosed gentleman here. He was very much like he was kind of like Aesop in a way. He wrote, or Grimm, the Grimm brothers Grimm. He wrote a bunch of fairy tales,
Hmm.
with which Moreau uh, provided a lot of the illustration for. And he was commissioned by the collector Anthony Rowe. The project began in 1879 and occupied him until the mid 1880s. In 1881, 25 of the watercolors were exhibited at the Galerie Paul Durand-Ruel as part of a show organized by the Société des Aquarellistes, Francois. And they appeared alongside 155 watercolors by 55 other artists. In
Hmm.
1882, he put himself forward for the Académie des Beaux-Arts, but he was not elected. But in 1888, he was finally elected to be a member of the Academy. In 1883, he was promoted to Officer de Légion d'Honneur. And like I said previously, in 1884, his mother would die, which was a great blow to him. He was close to his mother throughout his entire life. He was close to his mother and his father, but mostly close to his mother.
Hmm.
And the death of Pauline broke the emotional structure of Moreau's home. He had long lived in a tightly bound domestic world shaped by memory, affection, and retreat from public life. And after death, that inwardness deepened. The decade brought him great personal triumph and tragedy.
Hmm.
And with that, we'll jump over to the next painting here, which is Jupiter and Semele. This is an unusual six painting. We don't usually do six paintings, but I wanted to get one from his later in life. This was painted in, originally it was commissioned in 1889, but it wasn't completed until 1895. It's an oil on canvas and it measures 2 by 0.12 or 2.12 by 1.18 meters or 83 and a half by 46 and a half inches. And this is currently at the Musée de Gustave Moreau in Paris. Um, and Jupiter Semele is not just one of his last major works. The Gustave Moreau Museum calls it a true synthesis of his art and says it can be regarded as his pictorial testament.
Hmm.
Um, and the painting comes from the myth of Semele, a mortal princess of Thebes and lover of Jupiter, which is the Roman name for Zeus. Semele became pregnant by Jupiter, and of course, his jealous wife Juno, or Hera, disguises herself as Semele's old nursemaid, Beroe, and plants a fatal doubt in her mind. How can she be sure her lover truly is Jupiter, unless he appears to her in his full divine glory? And Semele asks Jupiter to reveal himself as he truly is, and he has already sworn to grant her request, so he cannot refuse. But no mortal body can survive the unveiled presence of a god. When Jupiter manifests in his divine splendor, Semele is destroyed by lightning. kind of like Moses in the burning bush.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Minus the
except for
impregnation and destruction, but
yeah, yeah. But the theory that no mortal can withstand the presence of a true God is
yeah, that is long
oh,
standing in human mythology.
Semele is what LGM's saying. So Jupiter and Semele, which makes sense. Of course, the center of the painting is Jupiter, enthroned as like a cosmic ruler. And Moreau breaks from the traditional iconography of the god. Rather than depicting him as a bearded patriarch, he presents him beardless, youthful, and almost androgynous. We'll zoom in on him a bit. It's not Jupiter as a thunderer king. He is beauty, art, divinity, and destructive revelation fused together. Semele does not die because Jupiter deceives her. She dies because the divine truth she desires is too immense for mortal flesh to endure. At the foot of the throne, there's so much going on in this painting, but we're going to talk about a few things here. So, at the foot of the throne, uh, Moreau places two allegorical figures: Death holding a bloodied sword, and Sorrow crowned with thorns, like Christ holding a lily. And a symbol of purity.
Mm-hmm.
The painting feels less like an illustration of myth and more like an altar panel, or even a visionary theological diagram. It's not just showing the death of Semele, it's showing matter, suffering, desire, death, revelation, and ascent. And it was commissioned by Leopold Goldschmidt and completed and delivered in 1895, and later donated to the Musée Gustave Moreau in 1903.
That's barely 10 years. That's what, 8
Yeah,
years in private hands before it went to the museum. That's
yeah,
interesting.
yeah. And we'll find in the wrap up slide that there was a little bit to that, because Moreau had a very he had a very specific detail for his paintings, or a specific want for his paintings. He had wrote a will, which I'll cover after this. There's a few other images here I just wanted to point out. So there's Pan, is down here at the bottom as well,
Mm-hmm.
and also an eagle, which is a representation of Zeus or Jupiter.
Hmm.
And
Do you know the female figure down at the bottom left with the moon over her head? That's supposed to be Hera?
that is, I can't remember what that one was. There's a few things down here at the bottom, because there's a sphinx over on the very far left.
Mm-hmm.
The woman with the exposed breasts is meant to be a sphinx, and then there's a sphinx on the other side as well. Um, and those are meant to represent good and evil.
Hmm.
There's a lot of symbolism packed in here, which is why it's called Hecate. That's who it is. It's Hecate.
Ah,
Um, that's right. It's Hecate. I couldn't remember the name. Uh,
thank you.
there's tons of symbols packed in here, and like we were talking before the stream, this almost has a Boschian level of symbolism packed into it. There's just so much here that we could actually do a whole episode just breaking down this painting itself.
Yes.
But I really wanted to showcase a painting from later in his life, to just show the full extent of his talent and the realization of his symbolist, him fully grasping and taking control of his symbolist leanings, um,
Well,
or destiny, as it could be.
and it's also that constant theme that you've pointed out in the past, where an artist is kind of nearing the end of his life, and there's almost some subtle change in the art that happens. And even compared to the Salome paintings, there is something very different, very final about this piece.
Yeah, Yeah, definitely. And he was an incredibly prolific artist throughout his life. He produced so much work, but not all of it was public, which is why he wanted to have um, his own museum, which we'll talk about here. And this is the last slide. We're going to go for the wrap up here. So the 1890s began with yet another personal tragedy for Moreau. His longtime companion, Adrienne Dureau, passed away at the age of 55 when Moreau was just 64. He described her as his best and only friend in his journals, and he first met her when he returned from Italy in 1859, and they remained deeply attached until her death. In her memory, he painted a few paintings. This is Orpheus at the tomb of Eurydice, of course, which would seem fitting for him mourning his friend.
Hmm.
And then the Praca and the Angel of Death, which is a bit more abstract. You can see this is moving into a more abstract style, which we see in more modern art and not so much in older art.
Hmm.
I'm going to jump back over to this one because I like it. In 1890, Moreau lost his father, his mother. By 1890, he had lost his mother, his father, and now Alexandrienne Dureau, the woman he called his best and only friend. His art had always dwelled on mythic sorrow, and in his final years, sorrow became part of his biography. And in 1892, he finally became a professor at the École des Beaux-Arts in Paris. The appointment came after um, the death of his friend Jules Elie Delaunay, who painted this. This is Sappho kissing her lyre. Um, and Delaunay asked Moreau to succeed him, and Moreau taught there until 1897. And as stated previously, his students included Matisse and many other influential artists. His greatest influence on modern art may not have been his stylistic imitation, but permission for younger artists to pursue the vision within rather than merely obey the appearance of the world.
Hmm.
In 1895, he commissioned the architect Albert Lafon to transform his family home into a museum. The house was raised and enlarged. New rooms were created, and the second and third floors were converted into spacious studios and display spaces. In his will of September 10th, 1897, he formally bequeathed the house, its contents, and the artistic labor of 50 years to the French state on the condition that the collection be preserved together as fully as possible.
Hmm.
And in 1898, on April 18th, he died after years of declining health due to stomach cancer, leaving him a legacy which still influences artists today. Um, One of the more prominent ones that I found, or one of the more interesting ones, was the artist behind the anime Vampire Hunter D. Um, Cites Moreau as an influence on his work.
Oh, that's fascinating.
Yeah. So, much like um I would say much like Hopper, whose work influenced a lot of modern media, Moreau has also influenced a fair amount of modern media as well, and tons of artists throughout the years.
Hmm.
So that is what I have for the presentation today. Like I said, I will upload the VOD because I'm still recording it on my channel, or on my OBS is recording it. So network problems aside, the full episode will still show up on my channel.
Excellent.
And I'm not sure if I will be here next week. Next Thursday is my youngest child's 18th birthday. So I'm getting very old.
But
But I believe Bleach has plans, and we'll carry those out.
Indeed, we might verge over into the realm of photography for the next one, if Dave's not here, and even if he is here, we might as well just do that anyway.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, again,
So
so we will hopefully have something, yeah, God willing, next week at the same time and the same. Hopefully both channels. Who knows? Apparently YouTube's having a stroke somewhere.
right.
All right. Well,
I'll work on getting that out, and I think that's it. So
indeed. Well, go out
this is
and go and enjoy some art and preserve your culture, damn it.
Yep. So yep, love your folks, love your heritage, and love your history. This is your history, people. And that's all I got. So
Right.
chat away.
Chat away.